Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for coming along to the Irish Consortium on Gender-Based Violence Annual Seminar. And the title for this year's seminar is Voices from the Frontline, Addressing Gender-Based Violence in Humanitarian Crises, Empowering Survivors to Influence Prevention and Response. Now we're going to have a slight deviation from what you see in your agenda here, in that we're very, very pleased to say that Minister Frances Fitzgerald has agreed to open the conference today. Now, she's done this, she's on a horribly tight schedule, and I have to say that one of the reasons, the main reason she's doing this is that I know Minister Fitzgerald for many, many years, and I know of her huge commitment to the rights of women, the rights of children, to human rights generally. And I just want to acknowledge that first. She's the Minister for Children and Youth Affairs, and that's the first time ever we've had such a minister, and I think it's a terribly important ministry. At the moment, she's very busy getting through the Child and Family Agency Bill. It's going through the Seanad now, I believe, and that's a very important agency that she's establishing. Really, I think that we're very lucky to have somebody who has such commitment. And I think for the Gender-Based Violence Consortium, it really is important to have the work acknowledged by the Irish government. And I think that's why to have a senior minister here to open the conference is a great sign of that support. As I say, unfortunately, Frances is in the middle of business in the Oireachtas, so she will have to leave us. But I really want to thank her for coming along today to open the conference. So it's over to you, Frances.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Helen. I'm delighted to be here this morning, and congratulations to you and the entire consortium for the work that you've been done to Bride chairing here this morning. And really it's an opportunity for me to say thank you to each and every person here for the leadership you're all showing on this issue, not just, of course, here in Ireland, but internationally. I see my colleague as well, Deputy Olivia Mitchell, who I know is hugely committed to the work that you're doing as well. So I'm very pleased to have been invited. I know it's very often Minister Costello that you interact with, but delighted to be here, not least because, as Helen says, this is an issue that is very close to my heart. And, you know, it is such a pervasive issue, unfortunately. And violence, physical, psychological, leaves behind it so much stress, so much interruption of human potential, so much damage that we have to be ever alert, not just internationally, but of course here in Ireland, to dealing with its very pernicious effects and total interference of life chances, life potential, and indeed life itself. As I say, you really are the experts on this. You're the experts on what's happening internationally. And we know the challenges are absolutely enormous. The very topics today that you're discussing, when I look at and when I see the photographs that we just took outside with the idea that women, the numbers of women who are being raped, who are being subject to sexual violence, particularly obviously, of course, in crisis situations, is utterly extraordinary. It's hard to take it in, actually, because we know that when we meet an individual woman who is experiencing violence, we can all remember the intensity of that. And when you put that into a context of war and pillage and rape and a huge humanitarian crisis, it is obviously escalated to an amazing degree. And I know you're going to be watching Voices from the Frontline, Dervla Glynn's film, and I know what's in that is very shocking indeed. And I was discussing it with somebody earlier, and they were saying to me, of course, there is such a need to work with the men who perpetuate violence in this kind of way and who interrupt those dreadful cycles that they are involved in. It's great to see the Defence Forces here. Helen and I share a background. Both our fathers were in the Defence Forces. And to hear about the work that's been done on gender equality in the Defence Forces. And of course, that's a challenge internationally as well, to make sure that Defence Forces, you know, all over the world are sensitised, are working, understanding this issue, and that they are, both in the work that they do and within their own membership, that there is a heightened awareness, understanding and commitment to eliminating this scourge, and when they are doing their work professionally, to take the appropriate steps. So I want to commend the work of the Irish Consortium on Gender-Based Violence. You've been doing it for a long time, and the organisations that are represented on the consortium. And of course, Irish Aid, the official development aid programme of the Irish government, fully recognises gender equality as a human right and an essential component of sustainable human development. Gender inequality is also a major obstacle to development outcomes and to achieving the Millennium Development Goal targets. You know that. It has to be dealt with. Violence against women, I think, is probably one of the most pervasive and very often least recognised human rights issues. And it is a global challenge, no question of that. We have to look here in Ireland, as I said earlier. A few weeks ago I launched the statistics from the Rape Crisis Network, and the statistics that are there show us still how pervasive it is as an issue in Ireland. The levels of abuse that the New Child and Family Agency, which Helen mentioned, will be dealing with. 1,500 cases confirmed of child sexual abuse this year, 40,000 referrals in relation to neglect and serious family issues. That's the scale of the challenge here in Ireland. And much, as we know, of the violence is hidden. No question of that. Still hard enough for people to come forward. And just to say that I think we have to recoil, probably, and you're the experts on the international work, but I'd say in the national work, we have to resist the temptation to think that there is any one easy solution or one easy thing we can say to women in these situations. The very tricky situations that women are faced with children. Leaving home may not be the easiest thing for women. Giving the kind of supports may not be easy to get the supports to them. So one of the big issues I suppose I've been examining in my own work is how agencies can work together. It's interagency work. And that is really absolutely critical when we're dealing with child protection and family issues and violence issues. I think we get the best results, we do the best for women and children when we work in that sort of interagency way. And that's why I think working with the Defence Forces, with international aid organisations, all of you involved in humanitarian work, it is about that bringing together, where possible, of NGOs and governments and organisations, that you will find the best results so that you can deal with the extraordinary situations that we are faced with in parts of the world today. And you are discussing a particularly difficult one, particularly in the Congo today. There's no doubt that gender-based violence, as I said, is a major human rights issue and has huge impacts on health. And we do recognise that responding and preventing gender-based violence, that it can be and very often is a life-saving issue. We are talking about life and death, and it does need to be part of every humanitarian operation. Violence against women is a manifestation of inequality and discrimination. And I do believe that in order to tackle it, and everyone here will agree, we must also look at the broader challenges of women's economic and political empowerment, as well as girls' access to education and women's reproductive rights. Long way to go in that area in many countries. And all of these issues are linked and reinforce one another. And when we change one, it can have a dramatic effect on the other, as we know. In both times of peace and indeed of situations of emergency, we must work to eliminate gender inequality and gender-based violence. I know you will be more familiar than many people in this country with the new policy for international development, One World, One Future. And the Irish government has made a strong commitment to continuing to play an active role in your consortium, Helen, on gender-based violence, working with Irish humanitarian groups involved, development and human rights agencies, as well, as I said, as the Defence Forces, so that coming together we can all share and learn and build our capacity to prevent and respond to gender-based violence. it is a cross-cutting issue in all humanitarian funding, no question of that. And I think it is very important that all proposals for funding received by Irish Aid are required to include reference to how gender and protection are addressed in emergency and recovery contexts. That's a very important commitment, because we all know how important proofing the funding is. Proofing equality is important, but proofing where the funding goes in terms of gender equality is a very important commitment. And I believe your organisation and all of the groups working internationally have done an awful lot to heighten the awareness at international level, within international organisations, on the need to focus on the particular experience of girls and women. And indeed, I would pay tribute to former President Mary Robinson, and I know you have a video from her as well. I remember very, very clearly being in South Africa at the Human Rights Conference, and the response that she got from delegates in that room to her articulation, very strong articulation of the needs of women and girls and the particular issues that needed to be addressed in an ongoing basis. It's hard, I think, for us to imagine the kind of situations that women and children and countries have been faced with in the devastation, for example, caused recently in the Philippines. Trying to get an immediate response in there, trying to take account of the individual situations that families and children are facing. The range of the needs has to be really overwhelming. And yet we see aid getting in there, beginning to make a difference. We see organisations, countries working together, sometimes not quickly enough, but when you do see it working, it is such a relief for those people and can change the quality of the immediate experience they're having in the face of such awful crises. I was very interested when looking into the background in relation to your conference today to see what we're doing at a national level, and indeed to inform myself further on the kind of initiatives that are being taken, and the recent UK call to action high-level event on violence against women and girls in emergencies in London on the 13th of November, where Ireland announced a range of commitments, 6 commitments, which you're probably very familiar with, but just to reiterate them here this morning, because I think it is very important to say that this is what we're committed to. And, as recently as November at the high-level conference, trying to really say what are the initiatives we can take that really will make a difference. Ireland undertook to ensure that the protection of women and girls in emergencies is prioritised in our development and humanitarian policy commitments. One World, One Future reaffirms our commitment, as I said, in this regard, stating that gender-based violence is a major abuse of human rights rooted in gender inequality. I think you can never say it often enough, and at a high level to have it repeated as a high priority and a high commitment. The protection of women and girls in the kind of emergency situations that I talked about will also be a key policy priority of the Irish government's revised humanitarian policy and our emerging policy and fragility context. That's very important. We commit to allocating specific human resource capacity and technical specialist expertise in order to support effective humanitarian responses to gender-based violence in emergency and recovery context. Through our Rapid Response Corps, this will involve proactive measures to deploy gender-based violence and protection advisors, in addition to a commitment to mainstream gender and gender-based violence in all training for Irish Rapid Response deployees. That's quite a change, a lot of words there, but it is quite a change, and it is a development in our response in those situations, and it's a clearer articulation than if you go back a decade ago. That's quite a development. I remember when we were beginning to call, it's probably 15, 20 years ago now, for greater awareness of the position of children and women, and to have a very keen eye to their particular experiences, to now have it articulated at a high level and to have it at an implementation level is really important. Ireland undertook to ensure that protection of women and girls in emergency is part of the appraisal criteria for all recipients of Irish Aid humanitarian funding. And that includes our humanitarian partnerships with multilateral agencies, as well as Irish and international civil society organisations in receipt of Irish Aid funding. That's important too, because that begins to change the behaviour of other organisations who may not have that built in as tightly as a criteria. And we maintain our commitment to active engagement, as I've said already, with the Irish Consortium on Gender-Based Violence, which is this unique collaboration between Irish humanitarian development and human rights organisations, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and the Irish Defence Forces. So, you know, we see the work that's been done. I've mentioned Mary Robinson already. I've mentioned the initiatives you're taking yourself. And it is good to have that commitment and the reaffirmation of the commitment to supporting efforts to implement Ireland's National Action Plan on United Nations Security Council resolution on women, peace and security, which includes the protection of women and girls in conflict settings. And examples of this are Ireland's support to programmes on gender-based violence in Kenya, Liberia, Ethiopia, Sudan, South Sudan, Pakistan, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Jordan and Lebanon. And I often speak to Minister Joe Costello when he's come back from the various visits to some of these countries. And it is very interesting to see the actual work that's being done on the ground that is the implementation, as I say, of this policy. And I think finally Ireland's commitment to progressively increase funding to the protection of women and girls in the emergency and recovery context over the coming 3 years. So I think it's very clear from those high-level commitments that the awareness is there, that the potential to do even more is there. As I say, I mean, it is pervasive. It takes new twists and turns in every emergency situation. I think we're in a unique position to offer expertise, to offer support, to highlight the inequalities that women and girls are facing in countries around the world. We have our own ongoing agenda here, but the agenda that you're working with is often so much more intense, so complicated, and so enduring that it is hugely challenging for all of you. And as I say, I'm delighted to have the opportunity to get in touch once again with the work that you're doing, to thank you for it, to offer the ongoing support and commitment of the government to tackle this very, very pervasive and insidious problem that can be so hard to deal with and which is so challenging. So thank you, Helen, for the invitation to be here. You have a very interesting morning's programme, very sobering, I think, not easy to watch or to listen to, the kind of statistics you're going to be examining today. But I think amidst the terror, if you like, and the scale, there is room for optimism. There is that increasing awareness, sensitivity and commitment, not just in Ireland, but around the world. And there is the leadership of humanitarian and aid organisations that really can make a difference to individual lives. Because at the end of the day, if you make a difference to one individual life, and then that gets replicated across the country, you begin to change that country's attitude to women and to girls. And we have seen dreadful situations where women were subject to rape and violence in countries, for example, post-World War II. You can take Berlin, and you see the diaries that came out years later about the experiences of individual women and what they had to contend with, and you see the kind of changes that have come about. So change is possible, but certainly it's by being united, working together, and highlighting the awareness, such as you're doing this morning, that we can make a difference. So thank you again for all of your work and for giving me the opportunity, however briefly, to connect in with the work that the consortium is doing. Thank you very much indeed.